we have two very exceptional guests who are going to talk about it today for you, and I'm happy to introduce them. From Riskified, we have Ephraim Rinsky and Alam Shemtov, and they are going to be taking you through our presentation, but I will turn it over to them in a second. But I did just want to mention that they will be taking questions. We're not going to have time for a whole bunch of them, but anybody that asks a question, somebody will get back to you. If it's not answered on the webinar, it will be answered offline. So please use the questions tab in your webinar dashboard to ask any questions that you want, and someone will get back to you about it. Also, if you miss for any reason any of the presentation, it is being recorded and will be sent out once the recording is done to all of the people who registered for the event. So all of you on the line will get an email reminding you when the recording is available. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Ephraim and Alan. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen, and take it away.
Thanks so much, DJ. Yeah, I'm Effie, and I'm sitting here with Alon Shemtov. I'm a senior marketing here at Riskified, and Alon is a product manager. He runs our account protection product. And today we're going to be talking about insights into preventing these account takeover attacks and helping you provide a great experience to your legitimate customers. All in all, we're hoping that after listening today, you're going to have some takeaway tips that you can implement right away to help protect yourself from these attacks, which, as DJ mentioned, are one of the biggest threats facing retailers today. A little bit about why we're so well positioned to help in this arena. We're an end-to-end solution for online fraud that's designed to drive e-commerce revenue. We offer a full suite of products to drive approval rates and prevent fraud throughout the shopping journey. And one of our products is ATO prevention. These are some of our clients. We work with some of the fastest growing companies in the world to reduce risk and grow e-commerce revenue and provide customers with a better shopping experience. With billions of transactions under our belt, we really have a good understanding of fraud trends across verticals and locations, and we're always working tirelessly to stay one step ahead of the latest fraud MOs. And we're doing this webinar today because one of the most rapidly increasing kinds and quite sophisticated forms of fraud that we're seeing over and over are account takeovers. So what is an account takeover exactly? So here's the problem with account takeovers. They have the ability to impact your best customers. Because merchants know that it's so important to nurture returning customers, because it's easier to get a customer to return to your site than get a brand new one. They have started letting customers, that's for a while now, have accounts on their site. These accounts nurture customer loyalty, and they also help speed out checkout. But the problem is that opening up these accounts has created a loophole for fraudsters to pull off a certain kind of very dangerous fraud, which is an ATO attack. So unlike normal CNP fraud, where a fraudster buys a card on the dark web or otherwise steals a credit card and just goes and shops, this is a situation where they have credentials of a real returning customer and log into that store. And again, because merchants they see that customers logging in with good credentials, they tend to assume this is a legitimate customer. And unfortunately, because of that, this type of fraud has a pretty high success rate. So let's talk about some of the fallout from these attacks. First of all, of course, like any kind of fraud, you have chargebacks. There's an estimated $5.1 billion lost in chargebacks from ATO attacks in 2017. Lone, as our head of this product, can you talk a little bit about the trends we're seeing in the ATO fraud landscape over the last couple of years?
Yes, of course. I think we were able to see over the past few years a very clear and observe a trend of an increase in the number of chargebacks and losses associated with account takeovers across the board year over year. And I think we can associate this increase we see every year to two main reasons. One is the data breaches we all grew accustomed to know that occurred over the past few years. We'll touch upon this later. There was the Equifax data breach, Yahoo, Uber. We'll explain a bit about those later. And the second reason is, as Effie said, the fraudsters are just getting better and better at it, and they know to exploit this loophole, right? So if I'm a merchant reviewing transactions, if I'm doing it in-house or using an external tool, no matter what, I will tend to approve good returning customers with good and old purchase history. And even if the customer changed, let's say, his shipping address or change his payment method, which he usually pays with, I will kind of be still tending to approve it.
Because you don't want to bother a good customer.
Exactly.
Right.
Fraudsters.
Okay, and so in addition to the financial loss, you also have a really danger of losing face and hurting your brand. So unlike normal CNP fraud, these sort of attacks can really hurt your brand. In what ways?
Merchants don't understand that being a victim of account takeover can be really a PR nightmare, right? You don't want your brand or your accounts being associated with the accounts being hijacked. It's terrible press, and you should be capable of protecting your customers. And in addition, if a customer have to change password for his online account with your site, he's gonna blame you. He's gonna hold you accountable for not protecting his data and his privacy. That's one thing. In addition, if you offer the customers to store credit card information on your account, that make matters even worse. They'll have to cancel their cards, and obviously they're gonna blame that. They're gonna blame you for that as well.
Right. So I guess unlike normal CNP fraud, where you just end up with a chargeback but no actual harm to the customer, here you've actually hurt them because their private information has been compromised, and they're probably likely to go to a competitor next time. Right, so you're going to lose the lifetime value of the entire customer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how these attacks happen. As Alon mentioned earlier, it all starts with some kind of data breach. You've probably heard about the big ones, things like Equifax, Yahoo, Best Buy, where millions or even billions in the case of Yahoo of good customer information are compromised. We've also seen a lot of smaller scale hacks. Snapchat had a hack where some fraudsters got in and posed as the admin and sort of tricked users into providing their personal information. On an even smaller scale, we see things like phishing emails, where a fraudster emails the HR in a company pretending to be a colleague and asking for private information about employees. Okay, so now that they have these credentials, it's not as simple for these fraudsters to just go and start shopping. They have to verify them, because it turns out that most stolen credentials don't work. The reasons for this: it's possible or likely that users have changed their information since they originally stored it with the entity that was hacked. Accounts do go out of use. But maybe the biggest reason actually is, let's say in the case of Yahoo, they stole a bunch of Yahoo logins and passwords. It may not be very valuable for a fraudster to have a Yahoo login. They really want to go to a store where they can buy stuff. So they have to check, is this going to work at any retail store? Now the thing is, because customers tend to use the same logins for many different e-commerce sites, this tends to be successful more often than you'd think. Because this is such a cumbersome thing to see if these credentials work, it can be very time consuming to do it by hand. The data thieves use bots, which are simple software applications, to automatically try to enter credentials and see if they work. Okay, so the fraudster has successfully hacked into some place. Then they verified that their credentials work to some store. Alon, what are their options now?
So once the fraudster verified the credentials, he understood this specific set of credentials give him access to any account. He has two main options. One is to go on a shopping spree by himself, monetize those credentials and commit, fraudulent transactions, good old CNP fraud as we are accustomed to, we were familiar with. That's one option. Then the other one is just to sell the credentials to other fraudsters. What we grew to understand at Riskified from our research and our data, that in most cases, more often than not, it's two separate people, right? There's, if you will, there is two kind of professions or roles. Every fraudster has its own specialty. One is good at verifying the credentials using the bots, as Effie explained, and one is good at monetizing those and at performing the fraudulent transactions. In most cases, fraudster A will commit, verify the credentials and then go on the dark web and sell those as well to fraudster B, who will actually be the one that will monetize those and make the fraudulent transactions.
Okay, and we have here just like it's kind of shocking how cheap you can buy verified credentials on the dark web. Remember, these are verified, so they're like guaranteed to work. And you can see for just 10 or 20 bucks, you can buy credentials to a good customer's store. Okay, so you've got fraudster B, who didn't do the hack, but he went on and he bought the credentials. And now he logs into the store. Now what?
The two most common MOs we see from this fraudster B guy is one MO we call mismatched ATO, and the other one we call loyalty fraud. Some mismatched ATO is very basic if you think about it. I have good credentials to a good old legitimate account holder, but in most cases, I won't have the same credit card of those. I won't have the same credit card of that account holder, right? Only if the merchant offers the users an option to store a credit card on their account, and only if the user actually did store a credit card on that account. Only in that case, the user that bought the fraudster that bought the credentials will also have the credit card of the account owner. There are very slim chances that he will, because of that, in most cases, the fraudster will use the account credentials they have and a credit card owned by a whole different person bought on the dark web. There are very slim chances that if the credit card is not stored on the account, you will be able to obtain the exact same credit card owned by the account owner. That's why we call it mismatched ATO, because it's two different names associated with the transaction.
Okay, so let me just see if I understand. So you're saying the most common fraud MO in ATO is that I have login that belongs to Joe, and then I just buy some credit card that belongs to an unrelated Jane, and I go into Joe's account, shop with Jane's credit card, and that works.
Yes, as we discussed in the beginning, this is what exactly the fraudster bank on, right? They trust that the merchant won't look in with 100 eyes on this transaction just because it's a good old legitimate customer. Even though they switch the credit card, this will still fly under the radar and go as a good transaction.
Okay. And then you said the second most common we see is loyalty fraud.
Yeah, so loyalty fraud, in this case, the fraudster job is even easier if you think about it, right? Loyalty fraud is where if the account provides the user any option of loyalty points, frequent flyer miles, rewards obtained in any marketing campaigns, or any other way the customer, or if the user can fund his account in any way. In this case, the fraudster can just log into the account and use those points or funds in very quickly. He doesn't need to introduce another payment method, a new credit card. There's nothing to tip off the fraudster. He just goes right in and checks right out.
So you just go in and there's already credit in the account and you shop with it.
Exactly.
And so that sounds like it doesn't even going to go through any bank. So there's even fewer places to stop it. Okay. All right. So now the really important part. So now that you know a little bit about how these fraudsters behave, how can you detect them and then eventually stop these attacks? So the key is, unlike normal CNP detection, which occurs at the point of checkout, right? When a customer is buying something, that's when you look and see is it a fraudster. In order to stop ATO, you have to look at the point of login, because if you're storing information for a customer, if you let the fraudster log in, that customer's information is already compromised and it's too late. You're going to have to tell that customer, hey, a bad actor got into your account, you need to change your credentials. If you had a card stored in here, you need to change that card. And the thing is that this makes accuracy and response time really important. A false decline at this point, in other words, a false positive, means locking a good customer out of their account. That's a really bad sort of amount of customer friction, right? They're probably going to go straight to a competitor. Also important is response time, because while customers don't love waiting while their orders are reviewed, I think they understand it to some extent, but they are not going to wait to log into the site more than a second or two. So what are we looking for at the point of login? Generally speaking, we're looking for changes in behavior or device from past transactions to this one. That's to figure out if this is a bad actor trying to pull off an ATO attack. And we're also looking for signs of bots, because remember, fraudsters use those bots to try to figure out the credentials to your site, to try to crack the code. And you don't want to give them the opportunity to do that. So here's some of the main behavioral and device changes you're looking for at the point of login. Alon, can you take us through some of these?
Sure. Before I talk about the specific indicators you should look at login, it's very important to understand that you have a lot of less data to deal with when you review logins, right? When we compare it to when you review the transactions. On the transactions, you have the billing information, the billing, the shipping, maybe the credit card information, everything that has to do with the payment itself. At login, you have basically just the user agent, the IP, the cookie, and the behavioral analytics. Those are the main stuff you'll deal with when you look at the logins. I'll run through these very simple examples. So the first one is geo IP change. If he used to log in from New York, and 10 times you saw him log in from New York, and the next time he's logging from LA, could be a bad indicator, not sure. If he changes device for some reason, if it's logging in from a different time of day he usually logs in, if he's entering the password differently than he usually does, right? This can also indicate, if you understand it's just copying and pasted, it could be a bot that we'll look at in the next slide, and it could be, a tool like LastPass that it's trending in the last few years. That it could be legit, it could be not legit, but you should look how the user usually enters his password and understand if it fits his usual behavior. The last one is browsing time before login. Simply put, you can assume that a fraudster with good set of credentials will log into the site, log right in using the credentials, pick whatever he wants to buy, and log right out. That's a fraudster. A legitimate user, if you allow guest checkout, it's not sure that he will log in at all. But if he does log in, maybe he'll do it only when he has to. If you don't allow guest checkout upon checkout, right? Just when you ask him. So these kind of behaviors differs between fraudsters and good customers. And in any case, you should always compare it to the typical user behavior that you're used to see.
So just to see if I understand this. So it sounds like fraudsters, as soon as they get to the site, they're going to try to log in to see if the credentials are good or not, because if they're not, they don't want to waste their time. Whereas a legitimate shopper isn't even thinking about logging in. Is that fair?
Yeah, and unless he wants something from his wish list or something specific on his details, he'll just log in when he has to.
Interesting. Okay, and then remember the other side of this is looking for bots, because you don't want to let them get all these attempts to figure out if they have good credentials to your site or not. What are we looking for here?
So for bots, these different indicators, right? We'll run through them quickly. We have, keys front velocity, velocity of login attempts. This could be very interesting and indicate credential phishing. Mouse movements, scroll pattern, and the mobile device orientation sensors. I'll give two interesting examples. One is that you could assume a legitimate buyer will have the phone in his hand and it will be in one position. Maybe a fraudster trying to bounce IPs and devices will have the device in a set position each and every time. And another good example I can think of is that it will be very interesting to look at the battery percentage, right? Because this is interesting. A legitimate user will have any type of battery percentage. He's not thinking about it. But if you think of a fraudster, again, trying to bounce IPs and devices between the different logins.
And running a bot on their phone.
Running a bot on the different devices, most chances are they are currently charging, and all of them at all time will be with 100% battery.
Interesting. So legitimate customers let their batteries run down.
Like the rest of us.
Okay. So, so you run your detection at the point of login. Now you have to decide how to respond. So there are going to be cases where it's clear to you that you're dealing with a good customer. There's going to be times when it's clear to you that you're dealing with a bot or an ATO attack. But then you're going to have a range of attempts that are edge cases, gray areas, where it's just not quite clear to you what to do. For instance, as Alon said earlier, let's say you have someone logging in from in a new location on a new device, but everything else looks the same. Is this a fraudster, or is this just your good customer on vacation and shopping from their friend's device? It's really unclear. So first of all, the first step is to figure out what exactly for you constitutes an edge case, right? What amount of risk is going to be for you unacceptable to simply just allow the login right off the bat? Right, your risk tolerance. At what point are you going to say, this is just too much of a gray area for me to allow a login, or for me to block for that matter, and I'm going to have to use a verification measure. Defining this gray area, really a lot of it comes down to the sensitivity of the data that you're storing for customers, right? The more sensitive it is, probably the wider that gray area is going to be. And then once you have your gray area defined, you need to figure out what your verification plan is, right? For edge cases, what kind of verification measure are you going to use for what kind of risk pattern? And there's a lot of options. Alon, take us through these.
Yeah, so there are, I think of, deciding on the right verification method for you guys, for each and every merchant is an art, right? Because if you think about it, there's a whole spectrum of verification method that, fits different type of online accounts. Consider yourself a financial institution or a bank, where if, a malicious actor gains access to someone's bank account, so, game over, right? He can do a lot of damage. And as a bank, you'll be comfortable with introducing a lot of friction for suspicious logins. For instance, denying the login until the user enters a verification code sent via SMS. That's one end of the spectrum, and I think you can agree with me that users will feel comfortable with it, and even more so, they'll trust their bank, trying to protect their data and their money. That's one end of the spectrum. On the other hand, you may have your e-commerce stores, right? The merchants online. It is dangerous. You don't want the privacy stuff, like information, to leak. You don't want the bad transactions being performed. But introducing a lot of friction on login may be not the smartest thing to do. So maybe you should introduce something as simple as just an alert via email with a link that says it was me or it wasn't me. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
And there's always the middle ground, right? Let's say you're a digital merchant offering like an e-wallet where you can fund your wallet you can fund your wallet. Maybe you'll find something in the middle. It's important. I think the main takeaway from this is that not all verification methods are born the same. There's, one that should fit you the most, and you should do a lot of thinking before you decide on the best one for you.
Right, and even within each of these, there are a lot of options. Probably the most common two verification methods are SMS messages and emails. We're just going to say a little bit more about each of those. SMS messages?
Yeah, so SMS messages, as discussed, it is considered a lot of friction, but they do have high response rate, right? Because as the rest of us, our mobile devices are next to us the whole time, so we'll be able to respond pretty quickly. And there's even more chances that we're shopping on our mobile device right now, so it's even easier for us to verify, shoot in the verification code back to the site. One more thing to remember about this is that you should verify that the phone number you're sending the text message is in fact the telephone number of the account holder, right? If you don't require upon account creation at your site the telephone number, so you won't have it, one thing you can do is to take one of the old legit transactions that never resulted in a chargeback and use the billing telephone number from there.
Okay, so I guess you're scared that maybe if you don't have a historical phone number, that the fraudster is going to, obviously if it's a phone number that's entered along with his transaction, it's worthless because it could just as well be the fraudster entering his own number. Just one more thing about this, you may want to consider when you send an SMS message using a verification code in there, because that's going to reduce drop-off by forcing the recipient of the email to go back to your site in order to enter that verification code that it was them, and then they'll keep on shopping. And then the second most common we see is email verifications.
Yeah, so email verification, first of all, you should consider same as SMS. Could be that the email account was hijacked as well. You should verify you're not sending an email to the fraudster. He'll be able to verify himself. Nobody wants that. I think there's three main ways you can go about emails. One is to deny login until someone presses, clicks a certain link, and then he'll be able to log in. The second one is the same as SMS, passcode, where the login is denied until he enters the passcode, but he gets it via email and not SMS. And the last one, which is just an alert, just like Google does when you enter your Gmail account, for example, from a new device or a new IP they never encountered before. 100 times out of 100 times, Google will do that because they want to verify it's only to legitimate account holders that are logging in. I think we personally at Riskified believe this is the most right way for e-commerce merchants to go with. It's lower friction, and in worst case, worst scenario, the user clicks, this wasn't me. The real account owner clicks on the email, this wasn't me. If the fraudster is still in session, you can log in right out, or you can, let's say this is a suspicious login, you can stall the fulfillment of the good until you get like a response from the sending the email. But in any case, the login isn't denied.
Is there a good way for us to know if the email account has been hijacked?
Oh yeah, yeah. One way to know is to use the obviously when the user will click the link from the email, he will get to a landing page. In this landing page, you can look at the IP and the user agent and compare those to the traditional IP and user agent the user usually logs in with, and you'll be able to understand if it's really him or not.
Okay. So just to wrap up what we've been saying about verification, a lot of merchants are understandably pretty squeamish about reaching out to customers to ask them to verify their identity. But in the case of preventing ATO, it's simply a necessary evil. It's not as bad as falsely declining a good customer and not letting them log into your store. And it's also not as bad as an ATO attack where your customer's data is going to be compromised and they're probably going to go to a competitor next time. And as Alon mentioned earlier, in some cases, these verification measures, especially in the current landscape, are even going to set your customers' minds at ease, right? It's going to prove to them that you're taking care of that data that they trusted you with. So just to wrap up what we've been talking about today, the key to ATO prevention is to do it at the point of login, not at checkout. Because if you wait until checkout and the account's already been compromised, again, if the customer stored a credit card information in the account and you allow that login, then that customer has to be informed that their credit card might need to be canceled, and you're already dealing with a PR nightmare. In order to detect bad actors, you're looking for behavioral and device changes at the point of login. And those bots, remember, the fraudsters are using those to try to crack the code to your store. So you're going to need to keep an eye out for them and deny them from your store as well. And then you need to figure out how to deal with those edge cases where there's maybe a little bit of risk, but you're just not confident enough to either allow the login or just flat out deny the login. You need to figure out in your store what's an acceptable level of risk. Again, as Alon said, this is going to depend a lot on how bad an ATO attack would be for you, how vulnerable you are. For instance, if you're an airlines and you have frequent flyer miles in your account, you might want to be a little bit err on the side of caution because you're very vulnerable to loyalty fraud. A fraudster can just come in, shop with those points, and then log out. Then you're going to need to decide what your appropriate verification measures are for different situations. When you're going to send an email, when you're going to send a text. If you're just worried about a bot, maybe you'll deploy a CAPTCHA. That's those things where you have to enter the numbers and letters to prove you're not a bot. And they need to be deployed automatically. Because remember, we're talking about the point of login here, and customers do not want to wait to log into their site. Everything's got to be real fast. And to wrap up, don't fear verification. It's better than a false decline or being the victim of an ATO attack. With all these things in mind, Riskified has developed our own account protection product. Alon, maybe you can just say a few words about that.
I'll be happy to. So at Riskified, what we offer with our account protection solution is deliver a clear allow, block, and verify decision or verify decision at the point of login. It's as we do at the point of checkout when we review the transactions, we give you a yes or no answer. We can do a very similar thing upon login. You'll send us the login details and we'll tell you this guy's good, this guy's bad, or this guy's suspicious, and he needs some kind of verification. But on the verification side, our solution is flexible. We can give you only the recommendations, and you guys can develop the verification mechanism, maintain it, and go about it however you want. On the other hand, we can build it for you. We can learn together with you what's the best verification method you want to go about, and we have already some of them built. And we'll go with what we believe together is the best thing for you, and we'll take the verification flow end to end, and relieving you from that need and taking it out of your hands. Moreover, you will benefit from our linking abilities across our network of thousands of merchants to compare login and transaction data from all of our merchants, and not just your own history of login and purchases.
Great. All right. I think we'll open it up for questions now.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. That was really, really great. I mean, there's as much as I've heard about ATO over the last few years, there were some new things in there that were pretty interesting to me, and I hope to everyone else. We do have a couple of questions. Please do ask questions if you want to. We may not have time to get to them. We don't have very much time, so I'm restricted to a couple, but somebody will definitely get back to you with answers to your questions if you write them in once we go offline, if they are not answered online here. The first question actually occurred to me as well, and this was one of the new things I was talking about, guys. You talked a little bit about how most ATO is done with a different credit card than the one that's on file. Why is that? Why are most fraudulent transactions associated with ATO performed with a different credit card? I would think that to a fraudster, that's one of the big reasons they get in there, is to use the credit card that's on file, but apparently that's not the case.
Yeah, DJ, so I agree, this is interesting. You just think about it, that what are the chances, if the merchant doesn't offer the option to store credit card information on his account, even if it does, right? So what are the chances the user actually stored the credit card information on the account? If it doesn't, what are the chances I got the account credentials of John Doe and I was able to, and his credit card was leaked, and I was able to obtain the credit card of John Doe on the dark web. I think we can all agree those are very, very slim chances. I can get the exact same credit card of the account holder.
All right, very interesting. I mean, it was just something that popped out to me as well, and apparently to this attendee as well. Another question that came in: is there anything else I should be looking at to track ATO attempts?
Yeah, so you should look at everything that's related to account events or actions performed by the user. Let's say the user logs out, right? Is it a legitimate behavior? We don't know. If, let's say, he requests to reset his password, that can be suspicious, could be not. Let's say he added something to his wish list. Let's say he contacted you by, I don't know, through Facebook, through chat on your site, through emails, through no matter what. All these account-related events should be collected and monitored. Just, first of all, to be able to compare them to all the past behavior of the user, and just understand if it's an anomaly or not, right? If they usually behaves like this or not. All of this should be monitored and examined on a case-to-case basis to understand if it's how the customer usually behaves or not.
Okay. All right, guys. I am. We're coming up against 45 minutes, and I am going to cut it off there and let everybody know that I did see that there are a lot of questions that came in, and we can certainly get back to you on that. Also, there is a rebroadcast of this webinar that will be available. It will be sent to all people that signed up for the webinar, whether you attended or not. When that becomes available, we will send an email out to everybody that signed up for the webinar so that they can access that recording if they missed anything or came in halfway through or whatever. I did want to mention also, as I mentioned at the top, the CNP Expo, which is coming up in 2 weeks. Riskified will be there. There's going to be a ton of education, and ATO is going to figure prominently in there. So it's a chance for everybody to come out and talk to other merchants about how it's affecting them, talk to experts and solution providers like Riskified as to how you might be able to address it. So if you want to check out cnpexpo.com, that's in 2 weeks in Orlando, and it's always a really great event and a great time for merchants to get together. So I appreciate the time that everyone's taken today to come and listen to our presentation, and I will see you next time. And thank you to Effie and to Alon and to everybody that showed up. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks so much, DJ.